Hi, this is Jennifer Daniels with John Broughton on Retrospectives on 3SER KC Radio. Good day, mates.
If you're asking me for an answer, I can only point you in the way I'm going.
Terrific. Well, firstly, congratulations on the new release, but more importantly, there are two other new arrivals that we must congratulate you on.
Thank you very much. I know we kept kidding that we were going to release the twins and then we would release our album. So January was the babies and then in April was the album.
How are the worlds of parenthood and music mixing so far?
It's been amazing. I mean, it's completely overwhelming. Having one is completely overwhelming. Having two is the only thing I can attest to, and it pushes you right beyond your physical limits. And you just have times where you just cry for no reason. You're just overwhelmed. But then you have times when it is such sheer joy that you can't even believe you had a life before you had these babies. And then traveling with them to do music is this whole other thing. I mean, you already schlep so much gear around, without baby gear, all the guitars and the sound and blah, blah. And so when we have the two babies and then we drive for 5 or 6 hours to the gig, it adds a whole new chaos to our groove.
Not to mention the family dog.
Right, Bob Marley, our dog, that's right, he still travels with us.
I believe the planning for this record began around the same time as you got the news that you were expecting.
Yeah, it was crazy. We took these 2 weeks last year to really just pray and ask our friends for, are we doing the right thing, continuing in music? We've been doing it for 10 years. We've been married for 10 years, and then we've been doing music for 10 years. They kind of came hand in hand. And we were like, do we want to have kids? We wanted to, but it was like, how do we be, rock stars? I'm saying that kiddingly, but how do we be rock stars and have a family, and will it work? And so anyway, we took these 2 weeks just to really dedicate ourselves to try to find direction for our lives. And at the end of the 2 weeks, we had pretty much decided, yes, we're going to at least go ahead and do this album and tour behind it. And we got our producer lined up, Scott Smith, in Baltimore, Maryland, here in the U.S. And we put all those plans together. Well, then, in the next week, we realized we were pregnant. We didn't know we were pregnant with 2 people, only with one. And we were just like, it kind of made us sit back and go, whoa, I think God really heard us and he answered our prayer, That was creepy.
Did it change your whole approach to recording the record?
Well, it did, mainly because it had to, how recording sessions will often go all day and well into the night. And here I was pregnant, and I was so tired. I was having to nap in the middle of recording sessions. So that was a crazy thing. People were very nice, and they were just kind of working around me. And, of course, I wasn't producing it, so a lot of work could be done without me. But, they are my songs, and it is my literary, child, I guess. So I'm very hands-on. But Jeff, of course, was awake the whole time and overseeing a lot of it. And Scott Smith, the producer, had he really was kin to us in our vision. So I knew it was in good hands, even when I was napping.
Yeah, tell us a bit more about Scott and what he brought to the table in terms of for the production for you.
Sure. Well, he and his wife, Jen, they have their own band called Naked Blue, and they've done this even, a decade longer than Jeff and I have. So they're fairly well known over here, and they're just wonderful people as well as wonderful musicians. Scott has a studio in his house, so we could just, we would stay with them because they're our dear friends, and we would wake up, have coffee, and then we'd just go down to the basement to where we could record and talk about what we wanted to accomplish that day. Scott had really put himself into pre-producing the album by listening to all the songs that were possibilities, picking different ones that he thought would work thematically as well as sonically. And then he just brought in these incredible players. Not only were they incredible that, say you put a sheet of music in front of them and they could play it just by reading the music, but instead they would bring their personalities to bear on the project. So for certain songs, he would pick certain musicians that would bring the grit and growl of, say, the song Spire Noise, which is a kind of an angst-ridden song, or, say, a beautiful, almost Scottish or Celtic violinist in the one song, My Lover's Ghost. So he really thought long and hard about which musicians would fit which song.
If you could place a theme on this record, what do you think it would be?
I like to say that it's about becoming reoriented. The album is broken up into 3 different chapters. The first one being kind of this, all of your very good and innocent, sweet dreams of youth, falling in love, wanting your good marriage, all those wonderful things. And then the second chapter, we kind of plunge people into a darker place. It's those things that really beat you up and tear you up in life. And then the third chapter being not this happy resolution that, everything's fine, but rather, okay, since I've been devastated and I no longer see reality in one way, now I can look and see, I can be more mature, live deeper, hold to the things that are truly grounding, and not just a shallow hope, but, the real things that can't be taken away. And so that's, at least what we wanted the third chapter to be.
I read where you stated that you started with a clean slate, so to speak, a blank journal when you started writing for this project. Is that a way you've approached album projects in the past, or is this a new way of tackling a new record for you?
Well, I do always journal. Well, I won't say always, because I'm not this religiously, disciplined person that I have to journal every day. But I have always had a journal handy in case that I want to put my thoughts down. But no, I got that blank journal for this project because I was so impatient. We had, how long had it been since I last talked to you? Maybe 5 years or even more
about
since
5
our
years.
last real full-length album. So I got that journal thinking, I am really going to, work toward getting this happening, because I was very impatient about it, and it didn't seem to be coming through. And we were waiting on these different record labels and trying to figure out who do we want to go with and who wants to go with us, and ended up just, again, releasing our own album instead of signing with anybody, mainly because of Scott. We really thought that he was the one to produce the album, and he wasn't with a label.
The first thing that jumped out at me on this record was the wide array of instrumentation. There's glockenspiels, there's strings, vibraphones, marimbas, right down to little touches like sleigh bells and triangles. A real attention to detail there. Did these touches come up in the pre-planning, or were they ideas that just sprung up in the studio?
I was amazed at how much Scott really did hear beforehand, before we ever got musicians in there. He knew the guy, Barry Dove, who did a lot of the percussion stuff. Barry is part of the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra, and he has a love for all kinds of crazy instruments. You should see his house. It is like a museum. You literally, people will think I'm just exaggerating. You literally can hardly walk through his home because of the aisles of bells and cymbals and drums from all over the world. And he would just bring in, the bass drum itself was so enormous. It, like, Jeff and Scott and Barry were all having to carry it around Scott's house to get it into the basement, and they still hardly got it through the door. It was a remarkable day. And yeah, he had lots of those odd different instruments, and some of them were a surprise. Like, he'd be like, I think what this song needs is this kind of thing, and he would just be, Scott would let him be very creative on his own and play with some stuff till it really fit. One of the coolest sounds, I think, is a waterphone on the song called I Am. I never knew what a waterphone is, but it's that creepy sound you often hear in scary movies, that one that goes, and he put it in the middle of our song. I'm like, this is never going to work. And yet it added the coolest little thing. We just did it one time so that it wouldn't be completely overwrought, but it's very cool.
One thing nobody could accuse you of being on your records is having an element of sameness through the albums. I mean, the first album was very earthy and acoustic. Summerfield Sky had that Celtic feel to it. The last album was a rockier sound. That must be something you look back on now with pride, that each album has come in a different direction.
I am glad. I'm glad that, wherever we are at the time, the music just seems to kind of hit that groove. We don't have to be anything. That's part of the joy, I think, of being an independent musician and not having to answer to anybody. You just do what you want to do and what seems right. I'm definitely most proud of this last one because not only does it have that literary theme going through it, but just the orchestral things that got brought into it. I think it's just a very pretty album and still has a lot of dynamic, some rock and roll songs and some very singer-songwriter ballads and things that are very stripped down, and yet it has a continuity through it.
One of the standout songs on the album is Every Single Day, and I believe it's a song you got quite emotional about when writing and still do when performing. Did you go through a personal dilemma whether to share that song with the public?
I never meant to. I wrote it one night while I was just in here in the kitchen with my guitar. I don't know why in the kitchen. I guess Jeff was in the other part of the house, and I just kind of came in here with my guitar and started writing it. It was we were coming up on our 10th anniversary, and I don't generally write my most personal songs in a concrete way. Like, they often end up being more abstract, and they could mean this or they could mean that. And yet this one is so clearly, obviously, a love song to my husband that I thought, well, I'll never play this one out. But then when I did play it for a friend, that friend was like, oh, no, that's the one. That's it. That's the one you got to sing, forever. And it's gotten some really good responses when we kind of started timidly playing it out. So now we're all about it. We're just like, okay, put it down.
Does Jeff involve himself in the songwriting process from time to time? Do you bounce ideas from him, or you pretty much keep them to yourself until they're ready?
We don't really have a strict way of going about it. Oftentimes he'll write the music first, and then I'll come and put words on it. Or sometimes I just lock myself away, like I have since I was a kid, in high school. So yeah, he's definitely a part of it, and even when I write the whole thing myself, he helps me to edit it and to make it stronger.
Mm. Now, I believe since we last spoke, you've gone through the process of having some vocal lessons.
Yeah, that was the greatest thing that I have done for my career. Maybe, I won't say greatest, but one of them. It lengthened my range and taught me how to take care of my voice so that I'm more healthy. We're playing 150 to 200 shows a year, so it's a lot of work. And the way I use my voice, we try to put a lot of dynamics in both range and volume and all that in the songs. So it was very helpful to me that, to take I took like 5 or 6. I would take them every week if I could afford them, but I took about 5 or 6, and they really helped me.
Mm. I must admit, I did notice a change in your vocals, particularly in the first track. I had to check twice I had the right CD, and because it didn't sound like you.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow. In a good way, I hope.
Oh, yeah, absolutely in a good way, yeah. You described the album earlier as like chapters in a book. Were the songs written in the same sequence as they appear?
No, they weren't. As we were just looking at the songs that were possibilities to put on a new album, I realized that they were kind of falling into 3 categories. And I had some stuff, I won't go into it, but some personal things that were very dark time in my life. So I think they came out of the trauma and then of the healing, and so they kind of started falling into these categories.
A song with a really strong statement on the record is You Slay Me, which I saw somewhere described as an argument with God. Tell us about that one.
That one is kind of my little Job song. It's a really dark night for me emotionally, and I went out on my deck, and I'd just been going through weeks of just angst and kind of arguing with God and not satisfied with some things that were going on in my life, and just really heartbroken about some things. And So I sat down on my deck and I was playing my guitar, not really meaning to write a song or anything, but you know how some of the things when you're a creative person, you really labor over your work, but this was one of those that was just kind of almost a gift. It just came out so naturally that it didn't even feel like you were working on it or writing it. And by the end of a little while of me playing and singing, it was a very cathartic time. I went in and I was like, look, this just happened, and it's almost like it closed a chapter on my grieving. You know, I was able to say what the song says, I guess, that I wouldn't do it this way, God, if I were you. And yet you are God and I'm not. And that was a very freeing thing to be able to come to grips with.
Mm. The songs on this record really do run a whole gamut of emotions. Did the feel in the recording studio reflect that as well? Was it an emotional album to record?
It was. Gosh, not only because of what the songs were about, but just because of what was going on in our life with being pregnant with the baby, what we thought was one baby. And I just, you know, like, oh my gosh, our whole life is about to completely change. And of course, here I am, you know, not reading any wonderful deep literature, but reading what to expect when you're expecting. You know, we were in the studio for, I don't know, over the time that I changed from my first trimester to my second trimester. So by the end, I was starting to feel the babies moving. And just so much was going on inside of me, and literally and figuratively, and it was just a precious time. And to be able to do it again with Scott and Jen, and to have them be such good friends of ours, it was a sweet time. I can't imagine doing it in a more comfortable and better way, you know, than with friends like that, and at such a huge time in our life.
There are two musical interludes on the record. Is it Sailor? Pronounced Sailor?
That's how I say it. I've heard people say Sela as well, but I think in Hebrew it's Sailor.
Sailor 1 and 2. Tell us about those and their role in the album as a whole.
Oh, thanks for asking, because that's one of my most exciting parts. Well, we wanted a way to kind of introduce the fact that the album was 3 different parts. So the Sailors, I started thinking of the album as a concept album, and of course, on one hand, the people working on the album with me were excited about that. On the other hand, they were like, ooh, concept album, that word can just turn people off. You know, they just think it's just going to be some kind of crazy thing. So we wanted a way to go between the different chapters of the album to kind of smooth it out and let people know, okay, say chapter 1 is this happy thing, so we're going to go from a major feel and we're going to take it down dark into this minor place and make it feel dark by the time you get done with that musical interlude, which we named Selah. And the reason we named it Selah was that in the Psalms, Selah is actually a musical term meaning an interlude or time to reflect on what you have heard and prepare for where we're going to go. So that's why we named it that.
Tell us about Home Burial, which I believe takes its name from a Robert Frost poem.
It does, yeah. The Frost poem is this dialogue between a man and a woman, a married couple who have lost a child, and the man has been out back digging a grave for that child. And when he comes back into the house, he and his wife are talking about practical concerns, but in such a very different way. Like they're grieving in very different ways. So he comes in, he's got the burial, the grave dirt on his boots, and it's now in the house, and that just kills his wife. It's so poignant to her, and yet the man, he's just, that's just part of having to dig the grave. That's just what happened. So here they're grieving in very different ways, and the dialogue that takes place doesn't ever transcend the practical issues of that burial, and yet it grabs your heart in such a way you're able to see into the deeper story of their grief. I wanted to take that concept and introduce it into my song. So I thought that not only would that give a shout out to Robert Frost, but would help direct people into what the song was about.
Mm. Do you often take inspiration for songs from other literary sources like that?
I do. I've probably talked to you before about the fact that my parents didn't let me listen to a lot of music growing up.
Yeah.
And so my musical friends were really poets, and just the rhythm and the cadence of words is what I take with me more than, musical influences. So, Edna St. Vincent Millay really influenced my song Conversations with Magdalene, which is on our last album, Summerfield Sky. And there are others, Emily Dickinson and a whole host of people.
Tell us about some of the players on the record. There's some new names there that we haven't seen with you before.
Well, let's see. We mentioned Barry Dove, who is percussionist with the Baltimore Orchestra. Of course, Scott Smith did a lot of stuff. The man who produced it, he did a lot. And of course, Jeff did tons of guitar work and mandolin. I'm blanking out on everybody. There were so many neat people who came in to help us. Jen, our friend Jen, Scott's wife, did cello, and Root did piano. She's so incredible. She's from Finland, and she's now over in LA doing some more recording just here in America, but she is an incredible musician, and she added such great piano to the whole thing.
Now, we've been talking for over 11 years now, and in that time you've remained proudly independent. Has it been easier as the years have gone by to remain this way with, I guess the internet has grown into a huge monster now? I guess that would make it easier?
Yeah, the internet is definitely what has kept us floating. It has gotten easier and easier because the word of mouth going through the internet, MySpace and Facebook, and of course our site, just jenniferdaniels.com. All of those have just gotten just like you. I mean, how else would we have found you or you have found us?
Exactly, yeah.
And so our little audience keeps growing.
So what are the plans for promotion of this record and touring? I guess they'll depend on family.
It does. I know. I would love to have this big story like, we're going to tour so hard behind this and da-da-da-da. But the truth is, we're just like, wow, our babies are 6 months old, and we can hardly keep the house clean, let alone make a tour plan. So I don't know. We're kind of in transition. We're going to have to see what the future holds for us. We don't know. Sure. We know it'll be musical, but we just don't know exactly what it'll look like.
Absolutely. Well, you got two future members, perhaps, of a backing band growing there, right there in your house.
That's right. We got our bass and drums right there. Actually, we are discouraging drums.
Jennifer, great to catch up with you again.
Oh, you too. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much for another wonderful album of music, and we look forward to the next installment, whenever it may be.
Thanks so much. I appreciate your help this whole time, all through these years.
And make sure you, when the first family holiday to Australia happens, you give us a call. We'll make sure we catch up.
Definitely. We'll do it.
All the best, and my regards to Jeff as well.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Bye-bye.
Bye.